So this is Nina, and welcome. I'm actually re-recording this talk with you because, as the technology gods would have it, the live recording I did at the gathering on August 4th has disappeared, and all efforts to retrieve it have failed. So because I really wanted you to have some of the details of Abe's last weeks, I decided to go ahead and re-record it. So here we are. Well, what a guy he was. He really wanted to have this party, to be able to attend this party, partly in anticipation of good food. Many of you know he was not able to eat for the last year or so of his life. His swallowing mechanism stopped working, and he got pneumonia every time he tried to eat. And it was a huge deprivation for him. He just never got over the desire for food, to be able to eat. Every time throughout, I'd go see him, and he'd tell me about the latest fantasy or dream or daydream or something about what particular tasty morsel he'd been able to eat. and or ask me what I had most recently eaten. So having the food here at this gathering he would have just dived in. It was one of his notions of his let's call it omnipotence, that he could somehow stage his death to immediately follow a final feast, and he would eat to his heart's desire and get pneumonia and die, and that would be the preferred way to leave. And part of the, needless to say, he didn't pull it off. Part of the idea of being able to come to his own party, his own memorial party, was inspired by a friend of his who actually did manage to do that. I don't know quite how she did it, but she wanted to hear the sharings, the remembering of her, and so she had the party before she died. But Abe wasn't so fortunate, so we are here to remember him and to just share all that's in our hearts and minds and memories about him. And I'm glad to be here with you. I want to introduce his family to you. Todd, his son, and Janine, his wife, Catherine, his older daughter, Lorna, his younger daughter, and Chad, his son, Todd's son. Larry, Abe's nephew, and his wife, Gail, and my daughter, Jillian, and her daughter, Kenzie, are all here, and I'm glad they are. We've really pulled together as a family in these weeks since his death, and it's been a huge comfort to me, and I think to all of us, to have Abe as our connecting link. I also want to give thanks to some particular people, Linda Brandon especially, for all she's done, her loving generosity to Abe over not just this immediate period, but the years of their friendship. Starting with the immediate, though, she prepared this wonderful one-page remembrance of him. She took the photograph that's on it and created this lovely piece that's on the website and is to be taken home by those of you present. She and her sister Lori have done just a masterful job of putting the website together. It took hours and hours and hours, way more. As she said, it took on a life of its own. Abe would be pleased, and thank you, Linda. Senior Helpers, Susan Grant is here. Senior Helpers was the caregiver organization that really made Abe's life and our lives so much better than they would have been otherwise. Susan was patient and conscientious and steady throughout, and it was not always easy. So thank you, Susan, and thank you, her caregivers. And Barry Horn, Abe's pulmonologist, he was actually the doctor and the person that everybody with a critically ill family member dreams about. I think he and Abe shared a certain curmudgeonly quality. They saw it in each other. They played to it in each other. And most of all, Barry was somehow always attentive to the life that remained, no matter how ill, how discouraged. The vitality in Abe was what Barry spoke to, and seeing him together, even in Abe's weakening condition, it was quite an ordeal often to get to Barry's office, but those threesome meetings together were kind of a high point. So those are the thank yous. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the last several weeks of Abe's life, because I think it's meaningful and will be good for you to have. Abe had been at the Orinda facility since February, but up until relatively recently, I think he still thought he was going to, quote, get better and get home again. He had an unswerving conviction that he was to go on living, and he fought for that. He fought to get stronger. He was angry at himself that he didn't seem to be getting stronger and more alert in response to his best efforts. Part of that meant that he and I were not having conversations about what I saw to be happening, namely he was declining. I got quite apprehensive, really wanting to be able to speak with him about it, but it wasn't until the last couple of weeks of his life that we were able to, with one exception. He did let me know that he wanted his to be cremated, and he wanted his ashes scattered under the tree in Tilden where we were married. So on the morning of the 4th, his family and I did that, and it was very good. It was coming full circle, and I'm glad for that. As he declined, I think his decline accelerated, probably starting in early June sometime. It was getting harder for him to breathe, and he was just clearly weaker and having more frequent periods of mental distress, agitation, and just kind of off. I'd call those mental lapses where he'd go off. His loopy periods, they were getting more frequent, and they were disturbing to him when he realized that he wasn't in reality. So those were happening more frequently. At some point toward the end of June, I realized that the resources that hospice could give us were now necessary, that we really needed the extra support and help and guidance through the ending. But I was reluctant to talk to him about it because I thought it would be, I thought it would frighten him. I thought he wasn't ready. I wasn't sure that he was ready. But we got closer, and I needed to at least introduce the idea to him. So I brought a hospice brochure in and showed it to him and asked to talk with him about the time when hospice would be a good idea. And he looked it over and was clearly further along in readiness than I knew. He really met me halfway and then some in that conversation, and thanked me for having the courage to bring it up. And I expressed over and over how relieved I was to be able to talk to him about dying. I had been so worried myself about having to, in some way, pretend, having to keep secrets from each other and not be able to go together up to the threshold. But that evening, that conversation was very welcome and very satisfying to both of us. And from there, things developed fairly quickly. The first hospice worker did come in when I wasn't there. When I next went to see him later that day or the following day, I knew she had come and asked Abe, how was it? And his answer was just so Abe, He said, well, it wasn't reassuring. I said, yeah, I guess it wasn't. I guess it isn't, but let's hope it's helpful. He spent more time sleeping and kind of absent over those next few days. I did manage to tell him on one of his alert periods that I was going to go salmon fishing on Saturday with our friends Celia and Mariquita, and he was delighted. He knew what it would be. He knew how much pleasure it would give me, and he just clearly had one of his wonderful kind of alive smiles on his face. So I did go. I was gone from very early Saturday morning till, 6 o'clock or so. And when I got home, I got 13 phone messages from the facility saying, he's declining rapidly, come as soon as you can. I did go out that night, but he was non-responsive, and I sat with him for a number of hours. His nurse came in and told me that she had had a conversation with him the night before, or he had made a comment the night before saying, I'm ready for the future. And she was startled because nobody expected his death to be quite so imminent. She asked him what he meant, and he simply smiled at her and shrugged. And as far as I know, those were the last words he spoke. I can't tell you what a comfort it was to hear that he knew that he was close and was ready. It just... I just feel so grateful and so admiring of him, because he was not temperamentally well suited to dying. He really wasn't. Part of that, I think, was that he had unfinished business, both with himself and with some people in his life. And part of it was just his passionate attachment to life, to have it to vitality, to being alive every moment that he could manage. But he was ready, and that's the good news. He got ready. So let's all share our stories about what he meant to us, who he was to us. Let's honor him by embracing his complexity. I often say about him that he was a cast of characters with an Abe in the center trying to direct traffic more or less successfully. He could be maddeningly self-centered and breathtakingly loving, and everything in between. In that period after he died, I sat with his body for a number of hours, and it was my birthday. He died at 5 a.m. on my birthday, and in kind of talking to him, I said, I remembered all the times I had said to him while he was alive, Abe, it's not all about you. It's not about you. And on this occasion, I had to laugh and say, oh, I guess it is about you. You win. You died on my birthday. Okay, so be it. So let's honor him. Let's shed the tears we need to shed and laugh the laughter we want to laugh at his jokes, at him, at the wonderful creation of life that he was. Let's honor him. Let's find comfort and healing where we need it, and enjoy the party. Thank you for being here.